Organized money.
Look, we really appreciate your support. If you want to keep this going, keep Organized Money going, go to organizedmoney.fm/subscribe and, sign up for your, put your email in. And then if you want to finance the wonderful, clear sound, the Rock Creek production company, you can also subscribe, give us a little bit of money, and we will use it to make it sound better and make the show better.
So Matt, one time I bought a $1.50 hot dog and a mortgage at the same place. And that place is called Costco. And I love Costco. And obviously it started out, you could just buy a bunch of stuff in bulk that you could use throughout your month. But there are all these vendors at Costco that you can do. It's become this superstore, not just for goods, but for a variety of different services.
I got, so the meat is fantastic. I actually got vaccinated. I got my COVID vaccine at Costco. But they also they do glasses and they sell hearing aids. It actually was a cheap place to get hearing aids before the over-the-counter stuff came. It's great. I used to watch this show called Fresh Off the Boat, and there was an episode where Costco was kind of replaced the church as like as sort of like a Sunday activity, was going to Costco. But there's also the free samples. I love Costco. But one of the things that an interesting experience I had, I guess a week ago, is I was covering a company that sells bottled water, like water coolers and stuff, and they do a terrible job taking over private equity. Well, we'll get into that a little bit, but it turns out that Costco sells they are a contractor or a vendor for Costco. So if you go to Costco and you buy their bottled water delivery service, you're getting the service from this company called Primo Brands. And one of the people I talked to is our guest today, who's a customer service guy for Costco, and he told me that he noticed that when certain vendors get taken over by private equity, the number of complaints spike. And so I was calling him in the context of Primo Brands, but there's a broader story there. And so I guess we figured that we would talk to him about what does Costco do, what kinds of scams and problematic brands there might be, or what kind of vendors go bad. So we'd have that conversation and learn about what's at Costco.
What's the guy's name?
Steve Hunt. Oh, sorry. Yeah. And sorry, let me start over with, okay. So we have
to start over.
We have a great guest.
I could come in and say it's Steve Hunt.
Yeah. Okay. Go for it.
All right, here we go. Right. And his name is Steve Hunt. He is a customer service guy at Costco, but he's a lot more than that. He's kind of a gadfly in Oklahoma City. Ran for mayor at one point, and it has some really fascinating insights about a company that, had these greater ambitions, wanted to be able to offer its customers a lot of stuff, but outsourced a lot of the services that it provides to these other vendors, who then are, not operating necessarily in the best interest of Costco. So it's really interesting. We got Steve Hunt here. Here it is, Organized Money.
All right. So welcome, Steve.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited about this. It's a big topic.
All right. So how long have you worked at Costco and what do you do?
Okay, I've been in the member services department for a year and a half. I started after, it's a little bit about myself. I'm in Oklahoma City. I've been deeply involved in a number of municipal affairs for about 2 decades. When our basketball franchise, the Thunder owners, who are private equity guys, decided they needed a new arena so that they can eventually sell a team, I was at the forefront of, fighting the handout. So I was fired from my concierge job at a fancy place downtown, and I decided just to go to Costco because it's something, member service type stuff is something I've done a lot. I worked for AOL in the mid-90s, opening up their member service centers. So I've seen these cultures a lot over the year, and being at Costco has really opened my eyes to a number of things.
So you know a lot about customer service, how to
Oh
deliver
yeah,
it, and also
yeah.
you piss off the bad guys, and so they're not like nice to you. Then
Well,
fair.
Costco is
Not at Costco. I meant like the Thunder.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Clay Bennett. I mean, we could talk about Clay Bennett for 4 or 5 hours. He
Um,
was the primary owner who was getting in trouble on loans. He leveraged the team against, then took over the jail in Oklahoma City and made it the deadliest jail in America. And I work with a group that has been dealing with that for 5 years. So kind of scattered all over the place, basically. But yeah, and I brought that, that knowledge and a desire for things to be better to my position at Costco. And so that's where this comes from.
so I want to start by, you and I connected about a week ago. We talked about a company called Primo Brands, which is a
Right.
water. They make their bottled water company. They do
Right.
water delivery, so they own a lot of brands like Poland Springs and Mountain Valley. There's a ton of different brands that you think are maybe separate. They're kind of the monopolist of domestic spring
Right.
bottled water, but where they really have market power is in water delivery service, so kind of water coolers. And when you go into like a Costco or a Walmart or someone like that, and you buy a water delivery service, you're really buying Primo Brands.
Right.
And it got taken over by a private equity company a couple months ago. And then, that's what I was reporting on, and I called you because you hear from Costco customers who buy it. So what happened?
Well, like I say, for about the past 9 months, I've been really looking at vendors who have been taken over by private equity, whether it be within the last year, 3, 4 years ago. And the theme has been like gradual degradation. They come in and they're like, oh, well, we're going to keep everything's going to be the same, nothing's going to change. That's what always has happened in the past. And then you slowly see like their member service contacts being moved to Malaysia or wherever, hours reduced and all that. What was kind of unique with Primo is just it was so fast from the time that they were taken over to the time you started seeing major, major issues. And for me, it just started one day when it was just like boom, 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 issue after issue after issue. People were having small problems, whether it be with billing or with getting their delivery scheduled, getting their deliveries happen at all. And what through poking around and reaching out, I learned that they immediately were going to shut down their local member services groups. Most of these companies have either outsourced or have internal buildings full of people with headsets on and talking. Once I finally got through to Primo, I reached a woman who was obviously very, destitute. And she told me a lot of people have just walked out because they're going to close our center here in a month. So what's happening with Primo is it seems like they're very quickly getting to the point that normally takes 2 or 3 years in a acquisition by immediately, cutting all the proverbial fat, which is basically people's lives.
Yeah, that's interesting that they're just accelerating a process that you normally see. And what's kind of funny about it is that the way that these companies roll up an industry, or at least the argument, the sort of fig leaf that they talk about, is that, oh, by nationalizing this industry, by putting it in a national scope, we're going to create more efficiency. We're going to make sure that we can get these out to more customers because we have all of the various nodes of logistics. And what you're saying is it's kind of the opposite of that, is that when these things get big, they lose the ability to actually serve the customer.
Oh, absolutely. And in some ways it's on purpose, and others it's just kind of the way it works. When we deal with someone like Primo or Sunsetter specifically, which is one that you said we should talk about, that's kind of who piqued my interest initially, was that
And
Sunsetter awnings.
who's Sunsetter?
So if you go to Costco's website, type in blinds or Sunsetter, it kind of pulls up a sort of third-party page integrated within, and that's Sunsetter, who we outsource custom blinds to, just any kind of
Mhm.
blinds and shades and things like that. You can go on and enter in your
Okay.
dimensions. And so we have, I guess, a lot of vendors who are builders, or in some cases, just regular folks that like decorating a lot and move a lot, and started getting an influx of people complaining about not just the quality of the blinds. I remember an elderly member's like, we've been using them for 30 years, and you used to be able to just like see through a little bit. And now that it's just a number of issues. But what happens is that you get this like large chain of people that are involved. Like, so you go on, you order, the order goes to someone in Malaysia who processes it and then sends it to a holding house, who then sends it to RXO, who then hires people to deliver or put together things that, sometimes ultimately is 5 levels of outsourcing. And, it seems like, honestly, like once you get that far, the person who ends up with, having to do the actual work is either like going to Home Depot parking lots and picking up guys to put in the truck and go do the job, or, something like that. But it's just, when you get all of these companies involved, it just creates so many moving parts that it becomes very difficult. And that's a subset of all of this.
So
Right.
it sounds like a game, kind of a game of telephone, right? So private equity company comes in, rolls something up, like usually a service that's sold through Costco, and then outsourcing, contracting, subcontracting, and it kind of can get screwed up in lots of different ways. But okay, so you're do customer service at Costco, which it's not, you're not selling water delivery or
Right.
custom
But it
blinds.
is funny. You can get like everything at I got my mortgage at Costco.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything.
I did.
I got vaccinated at Costco.
Yeah,
And
and I think that is why, and I don't know if it's intentional or if it's some aspect of complex systems theory where it just is happening like this, but it seems, and I'm a big Costco fan, and I'm not being a chump by saying that, like trying to protect my job or whatever. It's a good company, but it's vulnerable. It's very vulnerable. And one
Right.
thing that I would point out to, and I'd kind of like to make this a listener participation thing. If people go to like Costco and type in, say, Medline is a private equity owned hospital type, they sell like specialized wheelchairs and custom things like that. If you type that in, you will see one of their products, and then at the top, you'll see FSA eligible. And you click on FSA eligible, a number of about 250 different products. Costco has been wonderful with prescriptions. Years ago, when I was taking a certain prescription and lost my health care, couldn't get it, so I went to Costco, and it was like a fraction of the price without insurance.
Mm.
But when you look at like all the 230 items that are FSA eligible, click on any of them and then scroll down to specifications, and then there's like company. And an interesting exercise is to, take that company, either go into Chat GPT or wherever, say, who owns this? And it's always a company that owns them, that is the private equity firm. And
Right. So you're saying like Costco is sort of this central point where people now are conditioned to pick up a lot of stuff, a mortgage, a vaccine, whatever, water, blinds, and all that. And it's not Costco doing it because they just don't have the manpower to do it. So they have these other vendors who are basically coming into Costco to sell these services, and though it's the vendors that are the problem. But I mean, a part of it is that Costco has set up this architecture, right, where all of these private equity plays can flourish.
Right. And I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
well, so what do you? I mean, so they're customers of Costco. What do you tell them when it's a retailer, right? Or it's a they sell stuff, so of course they're gonna get a service, do a markup on it, and sell it, just like they might do that with any number of food or goods or services, right? That's the business model. What do you tell customers? Like if you're a customer of Costco and you buy one of these services, they call you and they're like, "Oh, it's not working." What do you do?
Well, we have a very pretty well off, pretty educated member base, and so it's not hard to when things get to a certain point, having the actual conversation with them. I'm like, and get a lot of elderly folks calling in, and I've got a real heart for elderly folks. A little of my background was dealing with a senior living facility here in Oklahoma City that was bought out by private equity, shut down, kicked out. So when it
You really
reaches a
love
point,
private equity, don't you?
oh my gosh, I
You're
got
just
into
tied
it.
up with them.
You
I
just
just got into it 3 years ago when Welltower Capital bought a place called Fountains of Canterbury here, bulldozed it with the intent of building a rental home neighborhood. Now they're not going to. People died, blah, blah, blah. But
It's good that the only private equity problems are in Oklahoma City. You're just hitting them one after the other. But they're only there.
We're super vulnerable because we're kind of like one of the last copy and paste comeback cities. I don't know if you've ever seen the little meme of the comeback city bingo with the axe throwing place and the $10 smoothies and all that.
Yeah.
But so I was talking about okay, so yeah,
Like
I'll
how
be on the phone.
customers handle it.
Yeah, and when it gets to a point of there's obviously nothing I'm going to be able to do for you today because this private equity firm has their services have literally gone from like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. to like 10 p.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday with a lot of them. And so when it's a situation where it's like maybe Friday at 6 and I could maybe help someone out, and then I learned that there's absolutely nothing we can do, I just tell them, I'm like, hey, this company was bought out by Silver Lake Capital 3 months ago,
Right.
and they made it really hard. And and it's incredible the reactions I get from people because people get it. They understand. Everyone is fighting over the partisan issues, but when you start talking about this with people, they really understand it, and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, yeah." And then it's kind of like, "What are we going to do about this?"
But here's the bigger question, because I think Costco has a pretty good reputation, particularly among people who shop there, and this represents a reputational risk. If a lot of its vendors end up being these private equity vultures that aren't delivering the products that they say they are, that's a problem for Costco. So the question is, how does Costco handle this when you see these issues pop up with a Primo Brands or a Sunsetter?
Well, it's kind of a perpetual motion machine, kind of like you remember Haynes Johnson's book about Reagan, Sleepwalking Through History. It's really a place that kind of runs itself. And there's this kind of utopian thought that we will only hire people at the ground floor. They'll do the job, they'll go up, and that kind of creates a system of vulnerability where you only hire people at the ground floor job, and then you get promoted. You either have people who like have really worked their asses off and been through hell to get promoted. And so they see the people at the bottom and they're like, okay, well, I did this, you didn't. But I think if there was more awareness of this, and I hope, that's why I'm talking to you all, this is really one of the biggest issues in America right now is just private equity taking it. And I guess we saw 2 days ago, Warren and others were fighting this new thing about private equity getting involved in 401ks. Yeah. But my thing is that, and trying to get to a point within the company, which is not going to happen at this point. I'm just like too much of a boat rocker. To a point to where we can do, where not we, because I'm not speaking on their behalf, where an entity like Costco can do something about it.
Well, Costco, I mean, at a very basic level, they could stop selling
Yeah.
the stuff they're getting lots of complaints about.
Yes.
Do they not
Yes.
do that? Like, what happens? Like, walk us through that process. Lots of complaints are coming in about some vendor. What happens, if anything?
It takes an awful lot. I mean, like I have conversations with people, that I'm not supposed to have, and like specifically with RXO, who does a lot of the logistics. There's just no one else to contract with because it's too hard to get little like mom and pops here and here because they've taken over everything. And
so you're saying Costco has no choice but to highlight these.
And it's engineered like that by making it to where you have no choice. So I think, like we are at a point where there's not a lot of central knowledge, activity, organizing around this phenomenon because it's not like it's kind of like its own thing. But what I would really like is for somehow people just starting to learn about this and how it's working in everyone's job, and it's affecting everyone. It's affecting renters. You know, they're taking over. Like the apartment over here was bought by some Florida company. They've got, if you go to their website, it says, you know, you can get involved in our equity firm, and we guarantee 8% increases every year on rents and stuff like that. So it's so out in the open, and I just really hope that, you know, Costco and other companies can start learning about this.
Do you think do you think like, so Costco's a well-run company. It has a good reputation.
Yeah.
And do you think that there's no, you know, presumably has an vendor management's really important to a company like Costco. Do you think there's no centralized place where someone's sort of tracking what's going on? Or is it just that, you know, people get paid for bringing in new vendors and having the sales do well, and no one is actually, you know, there's no incentives for, what do you think is going on there?
I've asked and I don't see any, like, you know, there's a lot of member surveys and things like that. And you know, when a certain brand gets a lot of dings, it's a long process of, you know, going to someone else. And in a lot of cases, there's just no other options. So it's just like, well, we're just going to quit carrying this type of item. And I think that with Primo, you know, that's kind of the deal there, because it's easy and efficient because you don't count the real costs, like Chomsky says, to just have one person just dealing with the whole country. And I do see efforts from conversations about a pilot program in New Jersey where all logistics is going to be internal. And so that's a good start.
Well, let's get into that, because you've mentioned logistics a few times here, and you've mentioned this company RXO. So tell us about the logistics of a giant operation like Costco and where the problems you perceive are.
Some of it is internal. A lot of it is RXO, but with vendors,
RXO they're a logistics company, right?
Yeah, and they were spun off from XPO a couple years ago. You know, all the usual players, Blackstone, all that, and that's another thing with
XPO is a huge logistic company. They Louis DeJoy, who was the Postmaster General for a few years, was the CEO of XPO Logistics.
Yeah. So let's backtrack a little bit. Where were we going?
Yeah. So, but you were saying, like, with these spin-offs. So RXO was a spin-off.
Yeah.
Of XPO,
okay.
And it became how did it become the primary logistics operator for Costco?
They do a lot of the, like, suburban and, you know, kind of rural places that you don't have a central distribution hub. Like, whenever you order online, it doesn't come from a store. It comes from a big, massive regional holding place. But the thing is, like, you know, we have a lot of our products that will be delivered by RXO from the regional hub and then taken out. But another thing is, a lot of the vendors, they negotiate to do the delivery themselves. So I'd say maybe 20% of stuff is vendor direct. And that would be the case with Sunsetter, you know, and they have their place where they custom make the blinds, and then it goes to a place, and then that place has
so it's
whatever.
Up to them. Costco really isn't in that transaction. They're kind of
well, I mean, I think that's probably the same thing with Primo. You know, they have they have their own water delivery trucks and everything, so they're not going to go
right. There's almost an Amazon model like that, like how it was in the beginning, where Amazon's sellers were responsible for their own shipping before they centralized it.
Didn't really do any of it themselves, and I don't know where they're going. I think they're starting to do a lot themselves.
They are now, fulfillment by Amazon, and they're charging the businesses a hell of a lot for it.
And I think a lot of their delivery people are contractors. So, and that's correct. The problem with this right here is, you know, when it's done all internally, it's a lot better, because the chains of contacting when you have an issue, like we have 3 different systems for tracking deliveries, and you go to one that's like an old Windows 3.1 system and it shows where it is, but there's just so many moving parts in delivery.
How do you even know if there's a Sunsetter product that hasn't been shipped? Somebody calls you and says, "Hey, I haven't got my blinds," how would you even know if they're handling it?
Yeah,
On the
there's
logistics
there's
end?
a system that you type it in and it shows who the vendor is,
Okay,
and a
so
lot
you're
of times,
seeing their
yeah, 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 yeah. We
services.
we
Okay.
have that for everyone. That's kind of maybe how I started looking into all these different companies that are being either already purchased or targeted. And
Hmm.
some cases, I wonder if it's, they know that there's that consistent relationship, and so let's buy that product, let's take it over, and then let's make it efficient. So it's not necessarily like everyone's doing the same thing, all the equity firms. Some of them are seeing that we have tons of sales, and so they target us because they know it's an easy way to get in and make a lot of money. That
Yeah.
makes
So,
sense.
okay. So let's talk about some specific products that you've seen Costco sell that are just not, that are like kind of, you know, dodgy, I guess would be one way to put it. So
There
what
you
is,
go. It's a
what
good
is,
euphemism.
what is FIVO?
Okay, Fivo is the company that you go on and you buy discounted tickets. And I don't know how that works with them, but it's owned by a fellow who worked for Goldman Sachs and now has started Fivo. And obviously he's trying to do what Live Nation has done, or whoever Live Nation was before Ticketmaster, Live Nation Ticketmaster now owns F1 and all this. And so this Fivo is kind of like the ground floor product of what I'm sure this hypomanic tech bro guy is trying to build. And so he started with Fivo, and
But what
so
is
many
FIVO?
times,
Like you go in and you buy tickets for what?
yeah, it really like events, a lot of sports games, a lot of festivals,
So
things
things
kind.
that Ticketmaster doesn't force the company to use Ticketmaster. It's a different ticketing service,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Costco is tied to it in some way.
Yeah, and they are a vendor who provide discounted tickets. You want to
Got it.
go to a Yankee game, you go on and you can use it on these select dates.
Is this
And
secondary
it's
market? Like, so are these tickets that have come in already?
What's
Or
what's
are they
wrong?
the
What's
primary
wrong?
vendor?
What's wrong with it? Like, what's the problem with getting these discounted tickets?
it
Yeah.
feels like it's engineered in a way to make it very difficult for the consumer to redeem those. And I don't know if that's intentional or what, but it's a very paper thin network of people who work for this company and sell these tickets. Okay, so I guess what happens probably is Fivo says, hey, we're going to buy these blocks of tickets for these games for a cheap price, and then we'll make them
Aha.
available. And I don't know if like when they're not redeemed, what happens, but they're very hard to redeem, especially for elderly members. I've had, just countless times because you have to scan it and then you have to get a code and then you have to go to this place and, scan it
I see.
here. And there's so little human involvement that it's just,
So
it's
they buy a bunch of tickets, they put them out and say, "Hey, we're going to give these to you at a discount." And we don't know how
right.
they get them, but and then it's 16 hoops to actually get the ticket from a place where you're buying it to a place where you actually show it at the door and get entry to something.
Yeah, one elderly gentleman in New York. I mean, I just was heartbroken talking to him because you could tell that he had worked a long time to get a day off to where he can go up to see the Yankee game, and it just wasn't happening. And ultimately, I ended up like calling the ticket booth and say, "Hey, this man's going to come and see if you can help him." And because I got no help from the FIVO people, and so it's
Yeah.
just making life hard for members, it's making life hard for employees, and these firms are just making a fortune off of it.
Okay, so that's one of them. What about Shutterfly? What are they?
Shutterfly is my favorite. Leon Black, Apollo Capital. They you
That's a Jeff
upload.
Epstein guy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
how
yeah,
Epstein made a lot of his money.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. 155 million, and nice guy. He actually was involved in the well tower acquisition here. It's just hard to really keep your sanity when you're looking at this kind of stuff. But Shutterfly, they'll often have like really good deals and 50% off. You get 100 pictures printed, and so it's the same kind of thing, kind of like Vivo,
So it's a
where
picture printing service.
right, and you go on to Costco.com, you say picture printing, and then it takes you to Shutterfly, and then Shutterfly has, their little hub there where you order, and then it goes off to whatever location it is, and
And
then
they'll like send you the pictures back to your homes,
yeah,
and
yeah,
printed pictures and books and scrapbooks and things like that. Yeah.
and it's all great and wonderful until something breaks down. Like
Right.
if you get it and your pictures aren't right, or you have someone's naked selfies that they accidentally sent you or whatever, you're basically screwed. And one thing about the way that Costco operates that I absolutely know is that having such liberal return policies, a lot of that's what makes us vulnerable to these guys, because they're like, well, we really are the ones ultimately responsible for this, but we know that when something's returned, more than likely they'll just give you another one, and then we're off the hook.
I see. So in this case, they're sort of scamming Costco.
Absolutely. And, at some point, there's going to be an awakening to this, and not just in Costco, but everywhere, that, this should be what everyone's focusing on right now. And it's just impossible to get people to wrap their finger around it. Like, Chomsky says, it's a sentence to tell a lie and 10 minutes to debunk it. And this lie of private equity making our lives better is the biggest one there is right now, I think.
Do other customer service people at Costco quote Chomsky as much as you do?
There was one guy, but he left after he was there for like a week. I mean, I'm the people
You're an
that
outlier.
well, in a sense, I mean, I'm bringing Catherine Liu to Oklahoma City here in a couple months, and she, one of the best things anyone's ever told me was she called me an organic intellectual. But and that's that's what we need right now. And I think a lot of people know what's happening and are very intelligent and deductive, and we have great people that work with us. And I actually met with the head of DEI. I'm like, if you ever really want to take this stuff seriously, come to Oklahoma City and see the Black single mothers that are afraid to use the restroom and blah blah blah, just because their numbers are going to go down. But
Wow.
I don't, obviously, like I said, I don't want to talk bad about Costco. I think they're more of a victim of their own ways of doing things and trying to do things right.
I want let's get into one more of these vendors, and then I want to talk. We should talk about you a little bit. But Spring Window Fashions, what do they do?
Oh no, Spring Window is who owns.
Is that
Shutterfly.
Sunsetter? Is that the same as Sunsetter?
Sunsetter,
okay.
yeah.
We'll get rid of that.
So
And
are there any other like vendors that you think we should talk about?
There's just so many, like, Tupperware was bought by Stonehill, and I had this woman that it was sad because my mom used to have Tupperware parties when we were a kid, and it just, like, all these iconic things are just being taken over.
It's really funny because when you go into a Costco, the dominant kind of product brand that you see, of course, is Kirkland, right? That's the brand that not only does generic food items, but also T-shirts and all kinds of stuff. But you go past that, the store brand of Kirkland, and it's all these other companies, and a lot of them are these, private equity owned, maybe predatory companies. And it's really interesting because I think when people go into Costco, they're like, okay, I'm out of that world a little bit. I'm in a safe place here. But you're saying it's not safe.
Well, it's worse than you just said, because Kirkland doesn't make anything. They have vendors who make them for them and put the Kirkland label. And
oh, sure, that's that's a whole other story.
Well, that's a whole
episode
other
about store brands. But
with the private equity, and that's something that's like always secret, is who makes these, because you don't tell anyone, oh, this Kirkland was made by this Nazi company or whatever. So it's always secretive. But that's another thing that they're doing, is they're seeing the brands, and this is all over the spectrum with Target and Walmart, and they have, or maybe, I don't know if Trader Joe's has gotten this bad, but you have companies that make branded things for people, and that's another big target. And it's like,
No, it's just
So there's a
funny
lot.
because I think when people go into a Costco, they're like, okay, we're under the Costco umbrella. This is
mhm.
sanctioned by them, and so I feel good about this because I
Yeah.
paid my Costco card membership, and that's what it buys me is this trust, and that's what's being broken by these vendors.
Or certainly being targeted. I mean, they did an incredible job in the early days of that. Like the Costco dog food is incredible. I mean, like my buddy down the road, that's why I was really excited to go check on my buddy's dog. He's at Oshkosh right now, watching the planes and stuff. But phenomenal products, phenomenal, and that's one of them. And that's, it's like Mark said, exploit everything until collapse. And
Hmm.
we're reaching a point where it really seems like in the past couple years, and especially since COVID, this just gets worse and worse by the day. And every day I'm working, I'm like, oh my God, I wish, Gretchen Morgensen was here or some other person was here and just listening, because it's fascinating what you
Yeah.
see. I've got my Joe Rich Volcano poster up here, and there's a scene where, my father says there's a whole world of people that are asleep, and the few that are awake, life is just a constant state of amazement. And it's really what it is here. And it's
Right.
fascinating and at the same time very troubling. And, I wish I was here to say, okay, we have this initiative and we're all going to get together and we're going to start fighting this, but that's not where we are. That's where we need to be, though.
But it's almost where we were because the one thing that we should reveal here that about you specifically is that you ran for mayor of Oklahoma City,
Yeah.
and, like over a decade ago, and
Yeah.
Like you did
I-
pretty well, and like
Yeah.
had no money or anything. Like I looked it up, and it's like you got like what, like 43% of the vote or something like that. Like, it
like
was,
tell us about that and how you connected with voters, presumably around some of these kinds of issues.
Yeah, 2006, I was a big part of the National Conference on Media Reform, Free Press. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Mhm.
It was like kind of all the usual suspects. And
I
back
think I
then,
was there actually.
the one in Memphis,
Yeah, yeah, I went to Memphis. Anyway,
a
sorry, go
big,
on.
yeah. So just from the energy of that, I started doing little meetups and things like that. And then Oak Hill Capital Partners bought our NBC station, and I did a panel on that. Had some radio guys and some legislatures and stuff, and that was my initial foray into private equity and things being bought over. But it wasn't really until I started reading Gretchen's work, and just seeing just how bad it is. But yeah, back to 2010, there's like an hour left of filing. No one had filed. This was 2 years out of the housing crisis. And right after that, Clay Bennett bought the Thunder and brought them to Oklahoma City. And, I was the head of the fight on that about not giving them all this money to build a stadium, because we're in this moment where we need to, as Thomas Frank says, we need to be slamming on the brakes on this bullshit. Instead, and I was wanting to make Oklahoma City a place, a light on the hill, where we could fight this publicly funded stadium crap, and then a stupid idiot place like Oklahoma, as we're perceived to be, could lead the ground on that, and then off we would go. But that's kind of what led me to run for mayor in 2010. And it was crazy. I mean, like when just a regular, I was at FedEx at the time driving, and whenever like a real working stiff shows up and knows like who the players are, the Chamber of Commerce, the marketing firms, the PR agencies, once you start calling them out, terrifies them.
Mm.
And there was some real ugly stuff that happened. It wasn't as bad as it might be if I do it again here in February, but the bottom line is that people who are out there and working right now are just a real threat to this, the decaying systems of power around us, who are, kind of run by the private equity guys and all their friends and stuff like that.
So Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and I guess Oklahoma City, used to be the center of populism in America.
Mhm.
So we've talked a little bit about this, but in 1912, I believe that's when we last had a major socialist candidate, Eugene Debs. He got a substantial nationwide, but his top state was Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma was known as this kind of hotbed of radicalism, left-wing radicalism.
Yeah.
And now it's considered a kind of extraordinarily right-wing state. So, and I'm not saying I'm not saying, oh, it's completely changed, because I think
Right.
what left and right mean is very
Yeah.
there's something interesting about the fact that it was super populist lefty, and now it's like very, very right wing. I think there's there's a horseshoe dynamic there as well.
Yeah.
But what's your, I mean, you lived there, you ran for mayor, what happened? What's your sense of what's going on in Oklahoma City?
So if you go on Substack, I wrote a long, strange article called Dasha Nekrasova against Woody Guthrie. I don't know if you know Dasha Nekrasova. She's that Red Scare. It was one of those.
Oh,
stupid,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She had the 2017 moment with Alex Jones where she's like, blah, 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 she's high. And so she becomes this like popular left-wing figure and does a podcast with some other Russian woman. And it's very kind of Bernie-centric and platitudes about, another world is possible. And then in the past year, she's turned to the right and is funded by Peter Thiel. So I wrote this long thing if people would like to read it. It's on my Substack. But it explains that dynamic specifically about how over 100 years ago, we were a very, very socialist, very populist. You can read about the Green Corn Rebellion is a really fascinating thing. It's an uprising during the First World War, a bunch of farmers, marching to DC. But what happened, I think, primarily was National City Bank, who is now Citibank, made an insane amount of predatory loans in the 20s and 30s, which, created the Dust Bowl. They would give these loan packages to farmers and, in Pawnee, Ponca City, up in the Panhandle. And from my understanding, they started calling people on those loans very early so that they could take the land from them. But it was that and the over-farming of the land here that created the Dust Bowl. And it made the banksters in New York City a fortune. And that was kind of the initial moment where this change started happening. Fast forward 60 years later, Oklahoma still, for whatever it means, was all Democrat. The House and the Senate were Democrat. And then the Penn Square Bank crisis happened. And if you read about it, Philip Zweig has a really great book. Gretchen's friends with Philip. Belly Up, and then Mark. Oh, okay, great. Mark Singer, Funny Money. What happened was there was this idiot who was like an art major at Oklahoma University, Bill Patterson, who married the woman whose dad owned Penn Square Bank. He becomes the vice president, starts originating massive oil loans, selling them upstream, and this was partially engineered by a woman named Meg Salyer, who worked for Citibank, once again, was sent down to Oklahoma City to help engineer the financialization of the Penn Square Bank. And this bank was really what the TV show Dallas was about, the things that came from it. It's just who would watch a show called Oklahoma City, so they call it Dallas. But that was kind of like the center of big finance oil in the early 80s. And when everything fell apart, just like happened in the housing bubble, Penn Square Bank shut down, and then it brought about the real crash that, and all the other banks were bailed out, the real crash that led to the desperation that opened Oklahoma up to going from being this socialist or even just Democrat to extreme right. And it's, a real story of predatory activity, just as this private equity preying on Costco, preying on members is. And, we're just, people laugh at us all the time. They're like, oh, those idiots, if they quit voting against their interests. Well, what are their interests? These banks in New York who give money to these Democrat candidates, they give money to everybody, but that's the way they see it here. But there's a real sense of populism and anger, and a lot of people who do productive work here who are kind of starting to get it. I kind of MAGA whisper to a lot of little small groups, and these folks love me because, like, I don't know if I shared the email Chomsky sent me years ago. I think 2008, 2009, we were doing some organizing here. And when the Tea Party sprung out, he's like, you're right for working with them. These people have very, very legitimate grievances. They're just pushed in these directions. And
Right.
that's the problem with Oklahoma and other places. And then, this is the place where things can really change. And, and there's so many places like a Costco call center in places like this where people have just been driven into the mud for so long that they're looking for a savior in, these right-wing political figures, which, we all know it's all the same shit, just different branding.
Right. I just have one more question, and Ben will probably put this earlier, but I just wanted to follow up on this stadium deal because at my magazine, we've written a lot about stadiums and public money used for stadiums. And there have been some recent fights that have been interesting where communities did rise up and get stadium deals stopped. This was an early version of it. This was like, in the late 2000s, I guess, when you were doing this. But the way that cities always pitch this is that, hey, if we're going to be a world-class city, we have to keep these owners happy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's always this air of threat to it, and particularly for fans who have kind of irrational attachments to sports teams, they that really moves them. So how did you manage that? And tell me about that fight.
Okay, well, the first one, like I say, was right after the housing crash, and Clay Bennett and his friends bought the Sonics, and kind of, if you go back to those days and all the freedom of information stuff that came out, it was very, very, very sketchy, but it was just a perfect storm of being able to bring it here.
Right.
And
they moved the team from Seattle Supersonics, to Oklahoma City, and they had an arena built for that purpose.
And when that happened, it was just, we were bombarded with propaganda from CMA Strategies, who is the big think tank group. It's this guy named Pat McFerrin. There's a hilarious local NPR of him talking about me and my buddies who are organizing, saying these guys don't have any stake in the game. They're just looking for attention. Like those of us who are on the ground doing the real work are the weird ones. And then these exploiters are the guys, this guy lives in Norman and it doesn't even live in Oklahoma City and is making six figures to do this. All the while I'm like jeopardizing my employment at FedEx and spending money. But what I noticed is that there's like a real insulated group, specifically from the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce in Oklahoma City used to be all working people had businesses. Now it's all PR, marketing. But the first campaign was run out of the Chamber of Commerce through the Convention Visitor Bureau, which is taxpayer funded. So people were paying for the right to be told what to like. There was just, and it's all platitudes and, rising tide lifts all boats. So when the thunder came, it was, okay, this happened. We lost. I was on a lot of different news channels and radio talking to me after the fact, because I was the head of that. And well, we have it now. Let's fight to make a really circular economy, and let's use all of our native wisdom we have here in Oklahoma to understand why everything's connected. We did close, and this all worked great for everybody. Well, immediately I started watching the Thunder TV contracts going to Nevada-based Citadel, which gave the owners the right to keep all the revenues during the game. My dear friend Russell Perry is one of the largest Black owners of TV and radio stations. He owns a radio station here, newspaper. Me and several others were fighting for him to get the radio broadcast rights, and they're just like, no, we're not going to do that. And of course, second arena.
So the whole idea behind a stadium is look at how the community will benefit, and what you're saying there in that specific instance is the community wasn't benefiting; it was out of state.
No. So like the management is a company that was just bought out. but it's always been non-Oklahoma. The TV broadcast rights were non-Oklahoma. The radio broadcast, non-Oklahoma. The ownership has been like, it's the same thing. These ownership groups that buy these teams. And so on the second one, it was even crazier because there was this mysterious study about how $600 million a year come to Oklahoma City as a result of this. And if you pull up a Oklahoman article from 2019, that number was 70 million. So like, when it's gone up 900%, what are you talking about? And so it was a PR firm in Arizona that conducted a study about how, and we finally saw it and it was all bullshit. But by the time the vote came around in December, they do these things in times when voters are least likely to go out and vote because they can mobilize their base and they can target. The arena was announced in the summer of 2022. We had a primary. Why not do it during the primary?
This is a second.
Well,
so you're talking about two separate fights. There's a more recent fight with a new arena.
Yeah, because the original one was 2009, and
so it's 13 years old. So obviously it's obsolete after 13 years.
Paper mache and falling apart.
Right. It was set to self-destruct in 13 years. So
but all the owners
they got more money for the other one.
Specifically Clay Bennett, who I suspect has some financial troubles, and he's not going to be around much longer. I think he's got some health issues. But 2022 he tried to. This is okay. So let me backtrack.
Wasn't Chesapeake Energy involved?
Aubrey McClendon was one of the owners, and he's a real wild. He's oh man, where to go? He's just like a frat boy that used to love coming over and smoking pot with 18-year-old girls in my building, and fun-loving guy, and literally, her name's Jasmine. If you want to talk to her afterward, but. So he got into a lot of trouble with his shares and started leveraging the Thunder to try to make that money back. And I suspect the same is true with Clay Bennett, because in 2022, 2 years after taking over the county jail here in Oklahoma City through a group called CJAC, Sue Ann Arnall, I don't know if you know who she is, Harold Ham's ex-wife, who received the largest divorce settlement in the history of the planet, had been working on this group called CJAC that took over the jail here in 2020. And in the last 6 years, it's become the deadliest jail in America. I think he took that over as a way of extracting wealth out of the jail. They're getting a new one, blah, blah, blah. But he then tries to take Dorchester Capital, private equity firm that he owns, public. They realize how horrible he was. Turned it down. 2 days later, he asked for a new arena. So that just shows that so many of these players, be it Leon Black with Apollo, the other guy that owns Roark Capital that came out of Drexel Burnham, it's never enough. It's never enough. And this new arena, it's going to be built. Who knows what's next after that?
Right. So last question about, first of all, it sounds a little bit like, well, okay. Last question. Are you going to run for mayor again?
I really want to. David Holt, I don't know if you know much about him, but if you want to go down a crazy rabbit hole, learn about this guy. He's kind of the guy who... Mayor of Oklahoma City. Yeah. Bill Kristol has been working with him and Gavin Newsom for the past 6 years to possibly be on a presidential ticket in 2028. And in 2028, there's going to be two different sets of Olympic events here in Oklahoma City, softball and aquatic events. And I've done tons of Freedom of Information stuff and found Gavin Newsom and Holt have been talking back and forth to make this happen. So this is obviously... Yeah,
it's weird. I mean, the Olympics is in LA, and then they're just going to have some satellite stuff in Oklahoma City. It's very odd.
It's just, just random. You have to be careful when you talk about things like that. Like, it's not some wild conspiracy theory. It's what's happening. I've got all the Freedom of Information requests. So this is a very, very important time for him. He's like the most beloved, not progressive, but individual who's able to navigate the the things that liberals claim to represent. So they all love him now. But I mean, this guy in 2000 was paid supervisor for Dennis Hassert, not really a good thing to be facilitating the comings and goings of young men to his office. And then in 2004, he works with Chris LaCivita and Karl Rove on George Bush's reelection campaign because, he did things with him. And then, he becomes the assistant to Mick Cornett, who was kind of the grand wizard of organizing all this Thunder Arena stuff. And he became a state senator after that, wrote a bill to drug test welfare recipients, wrote a bill to benefit payday loan people, wrote a bill to make it illegal for municipalities to raise their minimum wage. But now, if you ever go on like social media, it's just, back from brunch liberal after liberal. It's like, oh, why don't you run for governor? Why don't you do this? And they love him. They love him. There's these two women that have this talk show now called I've Had It. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Yeah. I know them.
So it's getting incredibly popular. And do you know who they are before they had the show?
I think weren't they like did Bravo stuff or whatever?
Yeah. They did a show called Sweet Home Oklahoma, and they'd go out and have brunch and get in fights about whose kid's smartest or whatever. But just all of a sudden, overnight, they'd become this sensation. And they say a few things that sound good. They're very liberal. But when they had Holt on a month ago, it was just this love affair, and like they didn't even bother to look at not just his gruesome political past, but the fact that for 10 years he had a sinecure with this equity firm in Oklahoma called Hall Capital, made about $2.5 million just to take people out and have steak. And so now that's why he's so closely working with like Welltower, going on a million different tangents. Our baseball team, the Oklahoma City Dodgers, you're familiar with the name Dodgers, right? You've heard of it. Well, they were bought by this Silver Lake Capital, and there's all kind of threads of Holt talking with the Silver Lake Capital Diamond Baseball Holdings people about the acquisition. They own 45 other minor league baseball teams, and they are in works with David to start building condos around the taxpayer created baseball arena down there. So this is a man who's like very deep in all this stuff, and I would love to run against him. I mean, if I do, it's going to have to be like I did last time, like last minute, because they will come after me so hard. And a guy that's obviously this close to these equity firms. Yeah. You see him in New York during the Thunder. He's watching a Thunder playoff game at a bar, like right around the street from Apollo Capitol, and he gets up on the bar and dances, kind of Coyote Ugly moment, and he's out there talking with these people. So this like major web of awfulness, I think, could be addressed by doing that, and I want to. I wake up some days, I'm like, I'm gonna do it. I wake up another day, I'm like, fuck it, man, I can't put myself through this. But it seems like such a moment right now, and we've got the Mamdani thing that everyone's talking about. I'd love to work with him about some reparations for turning our state red 100 years ago, and shawarma.
All right.
But yeah, it's possible. I would like to. I'm glad that
Well, we'll be watching.
I know this was probably a little scattered and all that. But
no problem. We will definitely be watching. Steve, thanks so much for coming on Organized Money.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
Thanks. One of the things that I learned from that conversation is that Costco and Walmart and a bunch of these stores are natural repositories of information of private equity control and acquisition, and kind of how our society works.
It's kind of always been that way. I remember you writing a story about how Walmart was seen within monetary policy as market moving, right? You remember that?
I do remember that. Yeah. A long time. Yeah.
They had the ability, like if you see what Walmart's doing, you have a good early jump on what's going to happen in
On
the
inflation
economy.
day, the Fed guys would ask Walmart to like get
Yeah.
a sense of how they should set interest rates. Oh yeah, I totally remember
Exactly.
that. And
So that's a perfect example. And this is an even more interesting example because you have all of these private equity firms that deliver these services poorly collected in one space in Costco. And Costco has the information on that. And, we used to, in the ancient past, before Donald Trump destroyed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we had a consumer complaint database, and people could go to that database and see, okay, what banks seem to be the worst because they're generating the most complaints in this database, or what other entities in financial transactions are generating the most complaints. But in the absence of that, we could just go to Costco, right?
yeah, and actually would love to see, member of Congress or politicians like just send letters to these, to Costco or to these retailers and say, hey, tell us what companies, what vendors are giving lots of complaints because we might want to look into that. And it's just like a lot of information about scams and problems in our society.
And the other thing that might spur is Costco to have to take the problem seriously. That if a lot of people are buying bottled water delivery services at Costco and they're not getting what they want, and Costco doesn't seem to be dealing with that, pressure from government can maybe spur them to say, okay, we need to actually see this as the problem it is.
Well, one of the dynamics that we have in our society right now is a lot of customers have to sign arbitration agreements when they buy stuff like,
Right.
when they buy things. And so they can't actually sue the companies when they get mistreated or when there's a breach of contract or they're really difficulty in getting a class action. It's really getting class action status. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So at this point, the government has decided, the federal government's decided we're not going to care. State governments exist and they do protect consumers sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You do, and then individuals have a really tough time doing anything because it's just not worth it to sue on a $20 thing and you can't do a class action. But you do have these entities like Costco or like Walmart or, who could stand up for their customers. And I guess at some level, in some way, shape or form, they're sort of doing it if they get enough complaints and it, takes a while, but they really could do a better job.
Absolutely. And Steve's a pretty interesting guy. So I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as we did, and we'll have another one for you next week on Organized Money.
Organized money.